Okay, so in today's RPCS3 setup guide, I'm going to be doing the most comprehensive and full setup guide I've ever done on my channel. So we're going to be looking at how to install RPCS3 onto Windows PC, how to install firmware for it. I'm going to be showing you how to add games, how to use XMB, which we can also access through RPCS3, how to save and load states, which is a fairly new feature to RPCS3, and I'm going to be also showing you how to load and install package files as well as DLC, how to configure controllers, and finally video settings, and even a little bit of guidance on how to optimize your PC to make RPCS3 run a lot quicker. So anyways, this is the ultimate RPCS3 PS3 Emulator setup guide. Check this one out. Okay, before I start today's RPCS3 Emulator setup guide for a Windows PC, if you like what you see today, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation setup guides. That just means that you'll get a little notification pop up every time I release a video. And if you're new to my channel, check out my playlists. I do everything from standalone emulator setups to front-end setups and beyond. So we're looking at RPCS3 today, and the last time I did a setup guide for this was going back in October 2023. So of course RPCS3 gets daily updates, and we're going to start from scratch. So in this setup guide, I'm going to be showing you how to do everything. So if you're new to RPCS3, it's not actually that difficult to set up, but I'm going to show you how to do this. So if we just go to the RPCS3 website, the first thing I always suggest doing is just go into the compatibility tab. And once this is opened, we're going to find everything that works fine and not so fine on RPCS3. So playable, 68.7% of games as of recording this video today are 100% playable. If we just go down to the orange section, 28.67% are in-game, which means that some games will work, some won't work. Now we've also got intro at 2.63%, which is pretty much you're not going to be able to play those games, marked in that orange color, loadable and nothing, which are both 0% each, which is very good. So if we just take a look at some of the games, as you can see, a lot of these are actually in green, and if you match these up with playable, this means then that they're going to be 100% with no break-in game glitches. So I'm going to be using a couple of games today for this setup guide. One of them is going to be Little Big Planet. So if I go to L and I just look up for Little Big Planet, and I'm going to just remind you that say we got Little Big Planet European release and also Little Big Planet, say American, North American release, then both of the versions might be a little bit different in terms of compatibility. So if I just scroll down to find my game here and just make sure that this one's going to work. So here's Little Big Planet. Now you're going to notice on the compatibility list that you've got disk image and you also got a PlayStation icon. So the PlayStation icons are just telling us that this is going to be a PSN digital version of the game. And so the disk images are literally going to be a disk copy. And you're also going to notice, like I just said, that we got two different versions, and in sometimes we got three different versions of the same game, and this is obviously Japanese. So both the European as well as the American releases of Little Big Planet on disc are going to work fine. It says playable, but this won't be the case for other games. You might find that one region's playable, the other region isn't playable. The next game I've got to check out is Demon's Souls. And here we go, Demon's Souls. So same situation as Little Big Planet. We got a digital PSN version of it. And in fact, this one just says here that we got three different versions of this. European, Japanese and American versions. And they're all playable, as well as the disc copies of Demon's Souls in all regions. So what we're going to do now that you understand how this works, we're going to actually download RPCS3. And if I just scroll down, I'm going to grab the Windows version of this. So we've now downloaded RPCS3, and you'll notice that you'll download this in a zip folder package. If we just unzip this, or rather extract it, this is your contents of RPCS3. So what I'm going to do is right click on my desktop, go to new folder, and just call this one RPCS3. And I'm going to just highlight everything inside of that zip folder and just drag everything into RPCS3. Okie dokes. So next thing we do need to do is download some firmware. If we don't have firmware, we can't run any PS3 games. So I'm going to use Microsoft Edge browser to get this. Now for me, using Google Chrome, I can't download this at all. So if that's the case for you, use Microsoft Edge. It works fine for me. If I just scroll down, I'm going to update using a computer and download PS3 update. So the current version or firmware for PS3 is actually 4.90. And under downloads, it's going to say can't be downloaded securely. It's a very safe file. This is direct from PlayStation. We're going to go to keep and keep anyway. And this is going to download the PS3 updat.pup. And this is your 4.90 firmware. So while this is downloading, I'm going to just show you how the game structures will work. So here's my Little Big Planet game. Now ignore the .ps3 on the end. This was used for another setup guide I did. So Little Big Planet, and this is what the game contents are going to look like. So you're going to have a PS3 underscore game folder, and we've also got the same but update folder. If we go inside PS3 underscore game, this is what it's going to look like. So this is going to be the same for every PS3 game if you're using this format. So now that we've downloaded PS3 updat.pup, which is the firmware, I'm going to just drag that into the RPCS3 folder. And I'm going to go inside RPCS3, and I'm actually going to create another folder in here. So new folder, and I'm going to call this folder Games. And if I open up that Games folder, I'm going to just drag both of my games inside of here. And the purpose of this is just to keep everything nice and portable so everything's together. So we're going to come out and we're going to open up the executable to open up RPCS3. This is second up from the bottom. Just double left click on this. And here we go then. So straight up we'll see that use dark theme is actually checked. So this is for the user interface. We can have a dark theme or a normal theme nowadays. I'm going to leave this as use dark theme. I'm also going to go to create desktop shortcut. So instead of going into this RPCS3 folder every time, we can actually open it from a shortcut on our desktop. We also need to go down to I have read the quick start guide, and we also want to click do not show again. Otherwise, every time you launch RPCS3, you'll get this pop up. We're going to go to continue. And here we go. So here's my games inside of here and everything's ready to go. Now, at the moment, under the little terminal just here, rather the console, you're going to find missing firmware. What we need to do is install the firmware that we downloaded. So we're going to go to File, and then we're going to go down to Install Firmware. And if this doesn't take you to your RPCS3 folder, just find your RPCS3 folder, and we should find the PS3 updat.pup. If we double left click this, and this is going to take a little time, so grab a cup of coffee and don't show again, and we're going to start this process of installing the firmware. Okay, so that process is now finished, and that's taken me around 4 to 5 minutes, and I'm running a very good gaming laptop. Okay, so next thing I'm going to show you is how to download and use patches within RPCS3. So to do this, all we need to do is right click on a game, manage game patches. If you just left click on there, new patches are available. Do you want to install? Yes. Your patch file is now up to date, and here we go. So if we just open Little Big Planet, and we just open this one again, we're going to find out we've got some patches for our game in order to improve things. So for example, Beacon Custom Server, I'm not sure what this one is. We got a create mode, and we got infinite custom server. So what I'm going to do is, if I want to use one of these, I'm going to just check the ones I need, and that's going to set them. Then we need to go to apply and then save those patches. We're also going to go to Demon Souls, and we can do the same for this one. So manage game patches. And as I just downloaded for Little Big Planet, it's downloaded for both of my games. So you're going to find different games have various different patches. So for example, Demon Souls, we have an aspect ratio patch just here. and we can actually get some information what this actual aspect ratio patch does. So for example, if we go to configurable values, we can then change the ratios of how the game looks. Same for disable dynamic exposure. Some of these games will require patches to work, and I do believe Demon's Souls is one of them. So like I say, if you want to apply patches to your games, just make sure they're checked, and then you just go down to apply and save. Now we can actually change the way the interface looks, and we can just do this by going to grid at the top, and your collection of games will appear. And if we want to make our games look bigger using the grid mode, then we can just expand it using this slice just here. Very cool stuff. And we can actually boot up into XMB, and this process does take a little while, but I'm going to show you how to do it. And at this point, this moment in time, we can actually launch games from the XMB, but I'm hoping that developers behind RPCS3 are going to incorporate this feature a little later on. So to do this, all we need to do is go to File, Boot VSH XMB, just left click. Now, like I say, this process is going to take some time, but once it's done, and you don't have to go through this process every time you want to launch it. But it's a nice feature nevertheless, like I said, and at some point, if you keep RPCS3 installed, at some point, somebody somewhere might realize how we can actually play our games using XMB through RPCS3. So as it says, 36 minutes remaining, 41 minutes remaining, and this isn't joking. So I'm going to just put this speeded up right now, so you don't have to put up with around an hour's worth of waiting for this. Okay, so once that process is finished, we need to configure a controller for this. So I'm using a Google Stadia controller, and we actually need to configure this in RPCS3. So if we just minimize this, and what we're going to do then is just go over to the pads icon. So what we're going to do next is under handlers, just select, in my case, SDL. And that's going to recognize my controller, which is of course the Google Stadia controller. And now this is good to go. Now let me just remind you that under handlers, it might work for you using X input. In my case, it doesn't. So I'm going to just use SDL for this and go to save. Now, if we go back into this, we can then press OK. And just let this start rebuilding database, just like a real PlayStation 3 would. And to go into full screen mode, I can just double left click on my screen. And then to come out, you can also double left click on that. So just like a real PlayStation 3, we'll have to go through the initial setup process in order to run XMB. So I'm going to choose my language here, English United Kingdom. And for this part, because I'm not using HDMI, I'm actually using my laptop for this, I'm going to just go to no. Then select a time zone, so obviously you need to select where in the world you are. For this I'm going to just randomly pick Bucharest. And then obviously we got the set time and date, so really you don't really have to put anything on this. And then just to press X, I'm pressing A on my controller. Next up, we just need to configure a network setting. So now you're going to notice at this point through RPCS3 emulation, you're going to notice that compiling PPU modules, compiling shaders continues to keep coming up, and this is going to be the case for games as well. What this is doing is building graphics and building parts of data and just popping those into a folder. So generally on your second or third time of run the game, the lag you'll see is going to disappear because those shaders and all those bits of data and graphics are already going to be in a folder. So That's just a little bit of explanation behind shaders and why some games, and even XMB here, lags on the first time. But this is XMB itself, so like I said, right now at this moment in time, we can't actually load our games through RPCS3 using this, which is a shame. But like I said, I'm quite confident that the brains behind RPCS3 will implement this at some point. So it's worth installing this and going through this process just so you're ready for it for when that release potentially happens. But you can scroll through everything here just like a real PS3 XMB menu. So pretty cool feature there, and like myself, if you're a big PlayStation 3 fan, then you will enjoy this. So what I'm going to do is just double left click on my screen to just exit out of this. And do you really want to exit game? So we're just going to go to don't show again, and yes. Okay, so next up I'm going to be showing you how to apply updates, and we're going to be using updates which are known as .pkg or package files. So what we need to do for this is obviously grab the downloads themselves for the updates, and before you go downloading updates you need to make sure that the serials are identical to the serial of your game. So if we take a look at RPCS3 just here, we got BCE S00611. So I've got my updates for this game, and as you can see just here, BCE S00611. And I've got each update up until the year 2010 for this game. So what we're going to do to install this is actually just go to File, and from File we're going to go down to where it says Install Packages, Wraps and EDATs, just left click, and from here you can then point this to where those updates are. So I'm going to go into my LBP updates folder, and here's my updates. Now we're going to have to do this one at a time. So what I'm going to do is start with the first update, and this is clearly 0126, and then we got 0127, 0128, 0130. So I'm going to show you as an example. So 0126 first, so double left click. Do you want to install this package? And it identifies the game just here, and we just need to finally check that the serial matches the serial of the game I've got in RPCS3. So I'm going to go to yes. So we've now successfully installed that update, and next thing I'm going to do is go back to install another update, which is going to be the next one. So 0127, and then yes. And don't show again because that can get a little bit irritating after a while. And File. And depending on the game you want to run, some games might have no updates, others might have a few updates. And as you can see, as I'm applying updates to this, the version of it is now going up. And it's saying that the update, the most recent update, is update 1.30. And I've actually got that update here. So File, Install Packages, and here we go, 0130. And yes. And that's it. So we can now see that the game is fully up to date because it doesn't say update. And as you notice, Demon's Souls doesn't say update at all. So that just tells us that Demon's Souls is fully up to date already. And just going back to XMB, you'll notice that once you've installed it, you can easily access it just by double left clicking if you want to go back to what that is. Now, if you've got DLC to go with your games, then really it's just another simple case of going to File, Install Packages, Wraps, EDATs, and then just doing what I've just done for the game updates. Very similar process, if not exactly the same. Okay, so let's get on to the games themselves. So for each game, we can configure video settings per game, or we can do it in general. So if we just go up to Configuration, and from Configuration we go to Advanced, and under Advanced, if I say go to GPU, I can then mess around with video settings from here, which is then going to apply to every game, which I don't recommend because most games in RPCS3 requires different video settings. But this is how you do it. What I do recommend is actually doing it per game. Settings for some games you'll find work fine, but if you use it as general, then the settings aren't going to take to them. And I'm going to show you what I mean in a minute. So if we want to make settings per game, if I right click on Little Big Planet and just go down to create custom configuration from global settings, if I left click, and from here I can then play around with video settings, CPU settings, everything really per game. Now, I'm also going to mention at this point that particular games need particular setups, and we can access a website which is RPCS3 Wiki. So this is the wiki for RPCS3, and literally all I've got to do is just Google in the name of your game and just put RPCS3. It'll likely be your first result. So most games, if not all games, have got a wiki page, and here we go for Little Big Planet. Now, if we go under, we'll see GPU configuration, and what this is telling us is how to actually set a game up. And this is actually uploaded from different users from around the world who uses particular games for RPCS3, and this is one of them. So what we need to do then is actually copy these settings if the game doesn't work when booting it up from default. And by applying these settings, 99% of the time, the game works fine. And as we establish, Little Big Planet, according to RPCS3's compatibility list, works fine. In fact, it's 100% playable. And now I'm going to just use these settings. So the first part of this is going to be under GPU configuration, which is obviously for graphics cards. So if I right click again on my Little Big Planet and I go to create custom configuration from global settings, I'm then going to do what it says and use the GPU tab. And the information is actually pointing to anisotropic filter, which needs to be set to auto. So if we go back to this, we're going to find anisotropic filter by default is actually set to auto, so we don't need to change this one. And we also got right color buffers, so we need to make sure this is going to be turned on. So if I go back to this panel on RPCS3, right color buffers, I need to check this one. So once those GPU configurations have been set, if we just scroll down, you'll find more information. So for example, we've got infinite loading issue just here with Little Big Planet. It says this game must be updated to at least 1.21 to prevent infinite loading screen. And there's going to be other bits of relevant information that you might need to know if you use these wiki pages. So anyways, we got Little Big Planet up to date and we put those settings for GPU in place. So all I need to do now is just go to apply, save custom configuration, and it should be good to go. So if I just boot this up, and just remember, when this is booting, you will see a lot of lag and you will likely see shaders appearing just like XBMB. So to play this, I'm going to just right click on it, boot with custom configuration because we just customize the settings for this. And here we go. So like I say, your first time around you're loading PS3 games through RPCS3. Sometimes it's going to take longer than others to get through the compiling PPU modules, but once you've done this, you won't need to go through this again. And you also find through RPCS3 that from time to time we will have to install game data to our hard drive.
Planet Earth. Or as the rest of the Omniverse call it, the Orb of Dreamers.
And looking back at that footage, the gameplay was absolutely fine, but sadly, as I recorded it, it was very laggy. But like I say, most times when you do play a game through RPCS3, you will find a lot of lag, and that's simply because of the shaders being built up. So something else we can actually do, which is a new feature to RPCS3, is use save and load states. So whilst during gameplay, all you need to do is just press Ctrl and S together, and that's going to save. Now you're going to find that your game will stop for a little while, maybe a few minutes sometimes. Some save states will take up to around 15 megabyte to up to 2 to 3 gigabyte. So once you've got your save state, all you need to do to load it back up, just right click on your game, and then you simply just go down to boot with save state by left clicking, and that will take you back to the place where you saved it from. So it's very simple. And as we know, for people who follows RPCS3, that feature is a fairly new and very handy feature as well. So I commend the devs behind RPCS3 for committing to put that feature inside nowadays. Now I'm going to talk about using RPCS3 if you're using a lower end computer. So obviously RPCS3 is a very demanding application for playing PS3 games. So it's going to likely lag even if you've got a mid-range gaming PC, you've got RTX GPU or whatever. If you do find lag, you can actually do something about this. So I actually released a guide the other day to actually making your computer run faster. I'm going to leave that in my description so you can follow that one. But very briefly, I've actually got this app, Razer Cortex, already on my computer. Razer Cortex is going to disable background applications and processes from going so our games can run a lot smoother. So I'm going to just very briefly, like I say, show you how this works, but for a full guide on how to get smoother gameplay for retro games, I seriously recommend checking that video out that I uploaded a couple of days ago. But from Razer Cortex, it's just a simple case of going to Game Booster once you've installed this, and then just go to Boost Now. So what this is going to do is just disable all the background processes running, and it's going to put those resources into the game itself. And as you can see just here, by doing this, I've just saved 3.19 gigabyte of memory, which can then be put into RPCS3 games. So in a sense, it's a little bit like the Alt Control, Alt and Delete method and then ending apps in the background, but this actually does it for you. It's a free app and I totally recommend this one. Okay, so going back to video settings, of course we can use the wiki for our RPCS3 games if you get any problems, but a good thing with RPCS3 is that you can actually upscale most games up to 4K or so, they say. So to do this, just simply go back into your right click and change custom configuration, and if you just focus on the GPU section, from here, you're going to find default resolution. Now it's going to say 1280 by 720, which is obviously 720p. It says recommended, and the reason that is because PlayStation 3 games, probably 98-99% of games, were actually designed for 720p. Don't touch this. The one you need to use is the one below it, which is resolution scale. Now, as we can see, this is set to 720p by default. If you actually move this upwards, you can then start upscaling. So for example, 150% is 1080p. And if you want precision, rather than using your mouse cursor, you can actually use left and right cursors on your keyboard and just gradually go upwards. Like I say, it will go up to 4K and beyond, but I wouldn't recommend this. It'll probably blow your computer up, to be fair. But the option is there, and as RPCS3 continues getting updates, things are running smoother. So in the future, I'd imagine a mid-range gaming computer could probably handle 4K quite easily, but not for now. So the option is there if you want to upscale your games. And something else to look at is, of course, things like anti-aliasing. So I always recommend on keeping anti-aliasing to auto for this. Anti-aliasing is going to smooth up jagged edges on objects in the game. We've also got aspect ratio just here. Now, of course, PS3 games were designed in the era when HDMI was coming out and everyone had flat screen TVs pretty much, which was all at the ratio of 16:9. 4:3 is going to make PS3 games look like a box, so I don't recommend 4:3 but 16:9 to leave that on. We also got shader quality. So shader quality is exactly what it says. It's going to add shades to the gameplay. But really, I just recommend leaving this to high as default. And under additional settings, unless Wiki says not to, I always suggest applying VSync. What VSync does, which is especially useful for PS3 games, is takes away screen tear. So screen tear is more common in 3D games. You'll see every now and again playing a 3D game that there's a slight tear in the game. It's not there all the time, but you will notice it's a noticeable thing. By selecting VSync, we can actually disable that from happening. Now, if you find a game which should be working doesn't work for you, then if you go to GPU, render, for me this is on Vulkan at the moment, if you find a game is black, it doesn't display, then just try OpenGL. Normally this type of setting would be put in the wiki anyways, but if it's not, that's normally how you do it. And for audio, if you get any issues with audio settings, then if we go to audio device, you'll find here different audio settings. So for my laptop, if I put speakers Realtek on, my sound works fine. And we got various different options here for audio, such as audio out. We can disable audio output. If you find QB doesn't work for you, try X Audio 2. And we got another option here, RSX Audio AV-port. So again, if you find you can't get any sound for your PS3 games, then just go through these settings and eventually you'll find the route that works for you. And of course, as always, once you've done your settings and you found what works for you, just go to apply and save custom configuration. And that's it for today's RPCS3 setup guide. So hopefully I've got you up and running with using RPCS3. And like I said near the start of the video, I do release these RPCS3s at least a few times a year because I'm a big PS3 fan and I do follow RPCS3 a lot. So in this setup guide, I've got you installing RPCS3 itself. Firmware's been installed. I've showed you how to add your games, how to add updates and DLC, controller settings, so hopefully everything's there what you might need. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation setup guides. Also join me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. And also remember that I do have a merch store now, so if you fancy buying some very cool Just Jamie merchandise, check that one out. But anyways, until next time, stay retro.